So, I was born in 1984. To some of you, I may sound ancient. To others, a spring chicken. But here is why 1984 is an important date. There was no word for neurodiversity. In fact, the word was not coined until 1998 by an Australian sociologist called Judy Singer, who herself identified as neurodiverse. You see, up until that point, if you struggled to fit into the traditional educational frameworks, you may have been considered unable to learn, not trying hard enough, weak, and not capable. We have come a long way since then. We have individuals who dedicate their entire lives to studying the brain and how we learn. As teachers, we study cognitive science, we look at how students process, store, retrieve information. But here is what feels like is missing. These children do not leave school no longer neurodiverse. In fact, there are millions of adults around the world who are neurodiverse. Some know it, some suspect it, and others will find out later in life. So what do you do as a neurodiverse adult in an environment that assumes adulthood equates to neurotypical? Well, you become an expert at an invisible skill, and this skill is known as masking. Masking is not about pretending to be somebody else. It's about presenting the best version of yourself that feels acceptable in the environment in which you are in. Am I calm? Am I professional? Do I have it all together? What do I look like to others? You see, many of these neurodiverse adults were once the children that struggled in these traditional educational environments, struggled to survive, to appear fine. And in that struggle, often shame can occur, stereotypes. Brené Brown talks about the idea of these shame gremlins, that in our power of vulnerability, we will experience a level of shame, the things that we fear the most. But it's only through these shaming experiences that we can release and be the best versions of ourselves, so we can be authentic. I remember when I was in college, I was doing my A-levels, and I was not thriving. I was struggling, actually, and I had a lecturer say to me, "Maybe this path is just not for you." I felt crushed. See, I didn't find out I was neurodiverse until I was 17 years old. Up until that point, I'd just been surviving, trying to find strategies to stay ahead of the curve. Angela Duckworth talks about this concept of passion and perseverance. And she talks about this concept of grit, the idea that intelligence does not create the ability to survive and thrive in environments. Actually, it doesn't even create resilience. It's our ability to hold on. She calls it gritty, to be gritty. I know what that felt like. I went to uni and I graduated, top of my class, over 250 other students. I got a 90% pass mark. I wrote a 10,000-word dissertation that was marked at 92%. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And I was capable. You see, in 1984, difference would have been deficit. Difference would have been deficit, and you would have struggled to survive. I remember becoming a teacher, and my biggest fear was actually having to write on the board. And I had an amazing lecturer at university, and he said, "What are you afraid of?" I said, "What if I can't spell a word?" And he said, "Well, you just ask the students. You humanize the moment. You let them know that you're not perfect." For a neurodiverse brain, that was crazy, to say the least, because perfectionism is my middle name. I want to get it all right, and I don't want to have those moments of vulnerability where my shame gremlins appear. But then I had second thoughts, and in that moment, I felt humanized. I felt seen, that it was okay to own this space. I've never stood in the room and told somebody, to so many people that I'm neurodiverse, that I'm dyslexic and ADHD, because for me, there has been a lot of shame. And I wondered why I didn't have the confidence to do that, even though I had demonstrated my ability to thrive. Kimberly Crenshaw talks about this concept of intersectionality. This idea that individuals will have different characteristic traits that create unique, compounded experiences that either allow them to live a life with privilege or discrimination and barriers. When I stand before you, I am a woman, I am brown, and I'm neurodiverse. I recently wrote an assignment, actually, for a course that I'm studying, and I had to reflect on what I've learned in my journey of teaching. I've been teaching for over 16 years, and I had this moment where I realized my neurodiversity has been my superpower. You see, I know what it feels like to struggle in that room. I know what it feels like to want to do well so badly and feel like there are barriers in your way. I know what it feels like for somebody to think that you're weak and not capable, when all you need to do is just hold on, because difference is not deficit. Difference is not deficit. Carol Dweck talks about the idea that the brain is not linear, that a fixed mindset shouldn't be what we have today. Actually, that the mind should be open, that we should have a growth mindset, because we can overcome, we can expand our thought process, we can achieve. I had an interview recently, and the interviewer said to me, "You've got a great CV, but tell us something that your resume does not tell us about you." I took a breath, and in that moment, I felt shame trying to creep back in. But I said wholeheartedly and confidently, "I'm neurodiverse. What my resume doesn't tell you is that I'm dyslexic and I have ADHD." I paused, slightly afraid, but living in my courage, living in my vulnerability. What transpired was an amazing conversation about adults in the workplace embracing their neurodiversity, actually leading conversations with students about how we've overcome those challenges in our own educational journey. And I felt in that moment free. I felt seen. For the first time in my adult life, in my career, I felt free. And I felt confident to own that I am neurodiverse. For so long, I have been masking and trying to appear expert, together, calm, collected. So I guess what I want to say in this talk, why am I having this talk, is that in this very room, we have leaders of today, and we have leaders of tomorrow. You have the ability to create environments that shape futures. Are you shaping an inclusive environment that allows everybody to be their best version of themselves, their authentic selves? Or are we leaning into fear of the unknown and equating difference with deficit? Susan Jeffers talks about the idea of feel the fear and do it anyway. We can all be afraid of the unknown. But when we embrace difference, and in this case neurodiversity, we know that it leads to hyper-focus. It leads to innovation. It leads to creativity. It leads to higher levels of productivity. So I say to you, is neurodiversity an afterthought? Is it a tick box on a recruitment process? Is it a quota that we're meeting? Or are we creating spaces that allow individuals to thrive, to be the best versions of themselves? Are we looking for the difference and saying difference does not equate to deficit? Are we leaning into vulnerability? Are we removing fear? And are we allowing courage to shine? Today's talk is about seeing through another lens, and sometimes that can be difficult if you haven't stepped into somebody's footprints, but I ask you today to be courageous for tomorrow and consider that we need to embrace a workplace that doesn't equate adulthood with neurotypical. And know that these young people that we teach today, that we see, will leave this educational space and go into the world tomorrow. Are we creating the spaces for them to be the best versions of themselves? Thank you.